And we're starting off the show tonight with some breaking news coming in. Just a short while back, Hamas issued a statement announcing its intention to extend the 4-day ceasefire with Israel. Before we get on to the other developments, let me just quote from that statement. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas seeks to extend the truce after the 4-day period ends through serious efforts to increase the number of those released from imprisonment as stipulated in the humanitarian ceasefire agreement. That is what the statement says. Now, on your screen right now are the latest visuals coming in from the Affair prison in West Bank. Now, as and when there is any movement on the ground with regard to the hostage and prisoner exchange, we will, of course, be getting you the latest updates, the pace of the developments being such that we will continue to go back to the latest visuals coming in from on the ground and helping piece together the developments for you. Now, as for the hostage release, it has been delayed, and we will be getting you the latest on that as well. Now, just for some context here, ever since the agreement was struck, Hamas officials have indicated their intention to extend it. In fact, some of them have also apparently stated that they are willing to release all hostages if Israel was willing to free all Palestinian prisoners. And by doing so, Hamas could easily buy at least 20 more days of relief. And this essentially could give the group time to regroup and recover, something that Israel ideally would not want. But then again, Israel, remember, is facing enormous pressure from the families of the hostages as well as from its Western allies. Take the United States, for instance. On Sunday, US President Joe Biden had said that he would like the fighting to be paused as far as the prisoners keep coming out. Let me just quote his exact statement. "That's my goal. That's our goal, to keep this pause going beyond tomorrow so that we can continue to see more hostages come out and surge more humanitarian relief into those in need in Gaza." Now, immediately after the statement was issued, the Prime Minister of Israel made a rather interesting remark. He said that he had spoken to Joe Biden and would welcome extending the temporary truce, but only on a condition. What's that? A condition that on every additional day, 10 captives would be freed. Let me quote his statement. "A longer truce would be welcome. At the same time, I also told President Biden that at the end of the outline, we will go to realizing our goals with full force, eliminating Hamas, ensuring that Gaza will not go back to being what it was, and of course, releasing all of our hostages," quote unquote. So clearly, both Israel and Hamas are in favor of extending the truce. But here's the thing. This ceasefire, you see, is quite fragile. Ever since it was announced, in fact, there have been fears of the truce falling apart. And these fears stem from the fact that Israel's operations did not fully die down. On Sunday, Israeli forces conducted a raid in the West Bank. The raid killed 8 Palestinians. This includes 2 minors. What was the raid about? Capturing a Palestinian who was suspected of involvement in an ambush. Now, from the Palestinian side, we have reports such as these. They say an Israeli hostage was released by Hamas, but without her mother. And this was despite obligations to not separate mothers from their children as a part of the ceasefire agreement. So clearly, Hamas also has not lived up to the terms and conditions of the truce. And this, in turn, begs the question, what are the chances of the truce being upheld after it is extended? And as for the hostages, does Hamas not have control over the remaining hostages? Are they being held by another group? To start with, reports saying not all hostages are with Hamas. Some of them are being held by PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or the Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine. This is another Islamist organization which operates in Gaza. It operates as Hamas's arm. In fact, it maintains some autonomy as well. Have a look at what the group is saying now. It says it will not release the hostages it is holding. Why is that? Because it wants Israel to release the Palestinians first. In fact, it also issued a statement Until all Palestinian prisoners are released, the Zionist soldiers in our prison will not see the color of freedom, quote unquote. Now, does that explain the delay in releasing the hostages? And if yes, then what is being done about this? According to Haaretz, issues have emerged about the list of those set to be freed. And there are disagreements on both sides. Qatar is trying to bridge this gap, from what we understand, and also bring the two to consensus. And we will be closely monitoring those developments. And our correspondent Jody Cohen, in fact, has been getting us the minute-by-minute updates, has been reporting from Israel all throughout. Jody, what is the latest, first of all, that you're picking up on the hostage release?
Hi, Molly. So we know that this is day 4 of this agreement. This is the final day as yet. We know that potentially there are talks going on as to whether or not it will be extended. But as part of this deal today, 11 Israeli hostages were due to be released at 4 o'clock local time. Now we're coming up to a 3-hour delay. So we're hearing that Hamas transferred the list of the hostages who were due to be released today. And once Israel received these, they saw that they say Hamas is not sticking to the agreements because some of the children will be released without their mothers, and that's in violation of the agreements negotiated by Qatar. And we know that that happened 2 days ago as well. There was a girl called Hila who's 12 years old, and she said that she had been with her mother up until 2 days before her release. Hamas claimed to not know where her mother was when it came time to releasing the hostages, and Hila was released. But she was released without her mother. So it remains to be seen what's happening. We're also hearing that they're not just negotiating on the final details of who is exactly going to be released today. We're also hearing that they are potentially negotiating on extending this agreement. We've heard some reports that have said 4 days. Now a report has come from Egypt that says that this could be extended by 2 days. It remains to be seen. They're cautiously optimistic that more hostages will be released this evening, but it remains to be seen what happens with that and also what happens with this potential extension that we're hearing about.
Right, Jody, I also want to discuss with you details of this hostage release and the possible reason why this delay is happening. Now, is there a possibility that Hamas is deliberately delaying the release? Because, you see, the delay also begs the question over whether Hamas has control over the rest of the hostages.
So we do understand that Hamas has control over most of the hostages. After this deal is complete, let's say the 50 Israeli hostages are all released after tonight, 90 hostages will still be mostly in Hamas's hands, but as you said, some of them are in the hands of Islamic Jihad, and a handful are reportedly also in the hands of the delay was because of this issue of whether or not remaining child hostages are hostages today due to be released are children, and some of them reportedly might be released without their mothers, and that's in violation of this agreement. So we know that Qatar is busy negotiating, trying to resolve that. It could also be a negotiation tactic. It's a well-known negotiation tactic that if you want to renegotiate something, you broaden the criteria. So if Hamas do want to extend this deal because they don't want to resume the fighting, then it could be that they're negotiating this broader, potentially a 2-day extension, potentially even a 4-day extension. We've heard that Israel has said that they're willing to accept 1 day's pause in fighting if 10 hostages are released, and they're willing also to release 30 Palestinian prisoners as part of that agreement, up to a maximum of 10 days. And again, presumably that's because there's a balance between they want the goals of freeing their hostages from, so the goal of dismantling Hamas and making sure that Hamas can't infiltrate into Israel again and commit a 7th of October style massacre, which Hamas has said publicly they plan to do again and again.
Right, Jody Cohen getting us those updates. Thanks very much for now. We're leaving it there for the moment. Also with me on the broadcast this minute is Brigadier General Dr. Meir Elran, Senior Researcher at the Institute of National Security Studies. Thanks very much for being here. Now, I want to start off by asking you for your assessment of Hamas expressing its intention to extend the ceasefire. Also, what, according to you, are the chances of the truce being upheld even after it is extended?
Well, first of all, I think that Hamas has an interest in the continuation of the practice of the deal, of exchange of our kidnapped hostages with its own prisoners staying in Israel. This is because Hamas is under military pressure to a large extent. So they have an interest of in implementing the deal. Unfortunately, they are not very consistent with what they are doing. Sometimes they are too late in the executing the deals. But generally speaking, I think that they have probably an interest to continue this process because it lessens the pressure, the military pressure on their positions in the Gaza Strip. So I think that probably would have an extension beyond the 4 initial days, possibly for some more days. I don't know how long it will hold. But Israel has presented its agreement to the continuation of the exchange because, of course, we need our captive detainees, those who were kidnapped, to be back home as soon as possible.
Right.
And also Israel will be willing, as it was in the past, to release all the Israelis kept by Hamas and the other organizations to exchange them for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Whether this will happen or not depends on to a large extent on the Hamas willingness to do that. So we'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely. I do want to talk in greater detail with you about the hostage release and the delay on that front. But here's a reminder to our viewers who might just be tuning in. These are the latest images that we're getting to you from the Ofer prison in the West Bank. Now, as and when there are any developments on that front, of course, we will keep a close eye. But just for some context here, as far as the hostage release is concerned, it has been delayed. What we also understand is that there are disagreements when it comes to that hostage release and that there are issues that are being ironed out. And Qatar, from what we understand, is trying to actually bridge that gap and bring the two sides to consensus. Simultaneously, we've been talking about how Hamas has expressed its intention to extend that 4-day truce. And as we were just discussing with our panelists there, what are the expectations that this truce will be upheld even after that extension? Going back across now to Brigadier General Dr. Meir Elran, I want to also ask you about the delay in this release, in the release of the hostages. Does Hamas, according to you, not have complete control over the remaining hostages? Also, the mediation efforts that are being undertaken by Qatar to actually bring the two sides on the same page and iron out those differences and those disagreements that reportedly have emerged.
Well, you have to remember that we are not negotiating with Hamas directly. Everything is going by the intermediates.
Yes.
Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. And this is another good reason, unfortunately, of course, for the delays and the uncertainties about the situation. But so far, the last steps have been not smooth, but still, many of them were practiced, sooner or later. And of course, this is important, but this is not the major thing. The major thing, of course, is to have our hostages back home, safe and healthy. And Israel has decided to be willing to continue with that until the last Israeli hostage is being released to Israel. And I think that this is our interest. I agree with this position, because then the next stage, of course, will be the return to the counteroffensive that Israel has launched against Hamas with a purpose, with their objective, which is very definite, is very supported by the military and by the public at large, to eliminate, to dismantle Hamas and stop it being a threat to Israel, as was the case back in October 7th. This has to stop, and it will be stopped by our military.
Right, and like I also mentioned, how there is this question mark over whether or not Hamas has complete control over the rest of the hostages, about how some of the hostages are being held by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So what do we know about any negotiations that are taking place on that front?
I don't know about any negotiation, indirect negotiations with the Palestinian Jihad. I think that we in Israel take the Hamas responsible for the entire episode. They were the ones to attack Israel on October 7th. They were the ones to conduct the atrocities that happened in these days, for the massacre of hundreds of people in Israel, close to the border, the communities close to the border. And if Hamas wants its people to be released, it has to take all the measures to bring our hostage to the last person back home. And the other thing is any other approach will be a psychological warfare against Israel, and it will be responded to with military force.
Right, we are leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here on the broadcast and sharing those perspectives with us. We are now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.